She walked into the base commissary wearing a faded military jacket, sleeves frayed. The old patch nearly vanished with time. A few young officers chuckled, whispering that it looked like something dragged out of a thrift bin. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just kept moving, her silence deeper than their ignorance. They thought she was nobody. What they didn't know? That jacket had seen more war than they'd ever read about, and the patch they mocked? It once belonged to a unit so classified, its name was erased from existence. Then, a 4-star general walked in and saluted her. Subscribe now for more true, hidden stories that demand to be remembered. The sliding doors of the Fort Braxton commissary parted with a soft hiss, releasing a faint gust of chilled air from inside. Miranda Reeves stepped through, a red plastic shopping basket in one hand, and the weight of old habits carried in every movement. Her jaquetta, faded olive-green relic with frayed cuffs, and a color that had faded toward khaki at the seam shung loose over her shoulders. The fabric, once crisp in regulation, now bore the softness of time, creased and threadbare, its elbows worn thin. A jacket like that didn't come from the PX. It came from memory. She moved with a quiet deliberateness, her posture straight but not stiff, her steps even except for a slight hitch in her right leg, a ghost of an injury that still spoke through nerves and tendons. She passed the front displays, rows of discounted cereal, seasonal flags, and patriotic-themed cookout supplies without a glance, her eyes scanning the aisles like someone who had long ago trained to take in every detail without appearing to. 2 young officers stood near the cold case, freshly pressed in their dress uniforms, sipping convenience store coffee and scrolling their phones. One looked up, did a double-take at Miranda, then elbowed his friend. The second followed his gaze, smirked, and tilted his head toward her. "Looks like someone raided their granddad's footlocker," he muttered. The other snorted. "Or a thrift bin on base discount day." Miranda heard them. She always did. The tone was unmistakable. Dismissal, condescension, that casual cruelty that comes from never having had to wonder what silence costs. She didn't respond. Instead, she adjusted the collar of her jaquetta, practiced motion, and moved toward the canned goods aisle. The edge of a photograph peeked from her inner pocket as she reached for her list. Just a corner. Just a flash. It showed 5 figures in desert camouflage, dust-covered and half-shrouded in shadows, standing beside a blacked-out helicopter with markings carefully obscured even before development. She slid it back without looking. As she compared prices on soup cans, her right hand paused, fingers marked by a pale surgical scar tracing across her wrist. She checked the list again, mentally recalculated, picked up 2 cans and moved on. Behind her, the laughter continued. She didn't turn around. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow over the commissary aisles, bleaching the labels of soup cans and cereal boxes into sharp rows of manufactured comfort. Miranda Reeves moved through them quietly, each step precise, purposeful, her red basket slowly filling with necessities. Her expression remained neutral, unreadable, a mask honed by years of discipline. But the air behind her shifted. "Bet she's one of those," the taller lieutenant murmured as he rounded the corner, voice lowered but not nearly enough. "Which ones?" his companion asked, already grinning. "You know, claims to be a veteran, but can't produce a DD 214, throws on an old jacket, and talks about classified missions whenever anyone asks." The shorter one chuckled. "You think she's here for the discount? Wouldn't be the first. Hell, my cousin caught some guy last month claiming to be Delta. Couldn't even spell SOCOM." Their laughter conspiratorial, smug, followed Miranda down the aisle, like a bad radio frequency, low and persistent. Her shoulders didn't flinch, her pace didn't change. But beneath the weight of her jacket, her right shoulder throbbed, a dull echo from another lifetime. She paused at the pasta section, reaching for a box high on the shelf, her sleeve pulled back slightly, exposing more of the surgical scar on her wrist. A thin, raised line clean, deliberate, made not by accident but by a medic's hand under urgent circumstances. A sharp jolt moved through her shoulder as she stretched. She winced, but barely. Behind her, one of the lieutenants leaned close to a shelf and stage whispered, "Real subtle, showing the scar. What's next? A fake VA card." Miranda didn't look back. She lowered the box into her basket and adjusted the sleeve, not to hide the scar but because the air in the aisle suddenly felt colder. For a moment, her vision blurred. Sand, wind, darkness split by tracer fire, and the shriek of a downed bird spinning hard into desert rock. Callahan's voice over Comstite controlled, "Reeves, we go now, or none of us go." She blinked once. The aisle returned. The laughter still lingered. She exhaled slowly and moved on. The line at customer service moved at the pace of molasses in January, punctuated by the soft beeps of scanners and the rustle of receipt paper. Miranda stood near the end, basket in hand. Her weight subtly shifted onto her left leg to ease the pressure on her right. The ache had deepened as the morning wore on, radiating from her hip down through the old shrapnel channels that VA paperwork never seemed to find. When her turn came, she stepped forward with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before. The clerk young, professional, badge reading. Alicia offered a neutral smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I need to verify my current address for VA records," Miranda said, sliding her ID and a neatly organized folder across the counter. "It's part of my quarterly appeal review." Alicia began typing, her fingers pausing almost immediately. "Are you active duty or dependent?" "Veteran," Miranda replied. "I'll need your DD, 214 or veteran ID card." "I can't provide either," Miranda said calmly. "My service records are classified. I have documentation from the DoD Records Office." She opened the folder, revealing a letter stamped with official seals, half its text redacted by thick black bars. Alicia's smile faltered. "I'm not sure this is acceptable." "It never is," Miranda said softly, not with sarcasm, just resignation. "I'll need to get my supervisor." Behind her, footsteps approached two sets. The lieutenants had made their way closer, still fueled by earlier mockery. One of them let out a low whistle. "She's still at it," he muttered to his companion. As the young supervisor arrived, a man in his late 20s, pressed uniform and clipped voice. Miranda already knew what was coming. He scanned the documents, frowned, and shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. These don't meet the requirements. We need standard verification. These are the only documents I'm authorized to carry." "Then I can't help you. You'll need to contact the VA directly." "I'm here because they sent me here." "I'm sorry," he repeated, but not like he meant it. Lauder subtle but sharp carried from a few feet back. The taller lieutenant pointed toward Miranda's jacket. "What is that anyway?" "Looks like a coffee stain shaped like a patch." The other squinted. "Or the ghost of one." The faded area above her heart, the outline of long-worn embroidery, caught their attention for the first time. A phantom insignia, stitched decades ago, almost erased by time, invisible to most. Not to all. Farther down the counter, a retired master sergeant, stocking pamphlets into a wire rack, looked up. His gaze settled on the jacket, narrowed, then froze. He didn't speak, but his posture changed. Subtle, attentive, the way old soldiers moved when something long buried suddenly brushed against the present. Miranda took her folder, tucked it back into her jacket, and turned without a word. The patch said nothing, but it had been seen. The morning light spilled across the polished floor, just beyond the commissary's automatic doors, casting long geometric reflections that trembled faintly with each footfall. Miranda adjusted the grocery bags in her hands, shifting their weight to her left side. Her limp was more pronounced now, flaring from the hip down, each step a quiet negotiation between pain and poise. She didn't wince. That, too, had been trained out of her. The doors slid open with their usual mechanical sigh. She barely noticed the trio entering 2 aides, flanking a tall man in immaculate uniform, silver stars gleaming beneath the overhead lights. General Marcus Harris, Chief of Strategic Operations, strode in without ceremony, reviewing a sheaf of documents as he walked. "Have logistics rerun the deployment matrix," he said to the aide on his right. "I want projections, not guesses." "Yes, sir," the aide replied, tapping notes into a sleek tablet. They moved with intent, focused, practiced, untouchable. The way command officers always did. Miranda stepped instinctively aside, drawing her jacket tighter around her, eyes cast downward. Just another civilian making way. Just a quiet exit. Until Harris looked up. His pace slowed. Then stopped. For a second, neither of his aides noticed, still walking until the absence of his footfalls caught their attention. They turned, confused then puzzled by the change that came over him. The general's eyes were locked on Miranda. Not her face. Her chest. More precisely, the barely there patch above her heart. A ghost of stitches. A shape only those who knew would recognize. The sheaf of documents slipped, forgotten, to his side. He came to attention. And saluted. Full military form. Perfect execution. The effect was immediate. The noise in the commissary checkout beeps, idle chatter, the low hum of refrigeration faltered, froze, heads turned. Miranda, caught mid-step, blinked. The general's posture was unmistakable, his gaze unbroken. She stood straighter by instinct, her training overriding disbelief. One grocery bag settled quietly on the floor as she returned the salute, crisp, deliberate, impossibly steady. Whispers rippled outward like shock waves. Someone at the registers gasped. The 2 lieutenants who had been mocking her just minutes earlier stood paralyzed near the frozen foods, confusion etched across their faces, amusement gone. General Harris dropped his salute, slowly, reverently. "Captain Reeves," he said, his voice calm but clear. "Spectre Group, Tyran 03. Time collapsed. 22 years folded in on themselves. Miranda lowered her hand. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady now. And everything around them fell silent. The cafe in the corner of the commissary was quiet, tucked behind a row of impulse buy displays and tired decor that hadn't changed in years. Plastic tables, aluminum chairs, a faint smell of burnt coffee. It was a space meant for hurried breaks, not history. Miranda sat with her back to the wall, instinctively choosing the seat that gave her a view of the exits. Old habits. Across from her, General Marcus Harris set down 2 steaming paper cups. Black coffee. No cream, no sugar. The way people drank it when they'd learned to survive on worse. He sat, but it took him a moment to speak. "I always wondered what happened to you," he said finally. His eyes were still searching her jacket, as if trying to reconcile memory with presence. "After the debrief, you and your team just vanished." "That was the idea," Miranda replied. Her voice carried the gravity of long silence. The general nodded slowly, hands cupped around the coffee. Spectre Group. The name hung between them like a blade sharp. Heavy, rarely spoken. "Operationally disbanded 2 weeks after Tyran," she said. "Files triple sealed. Personnel records sealed under Section 14, Delta Protocols. I've been off the grid ever since." His jaw tightened. "You're the last one?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. 3 of us made it back. Way died in 9. From exposure complications. Decker, VA. Didn't catch the brain trauma in time. I buried him 5 years ago. The general looked down at his coffee, but he wasn't seeing it. And Callahan? Stayed behind to hold the perimeter, Miranda said. Her eyes didn't flinch. Never made it out. Harris was silent for a long time. The noise of the commissary resumed faintly around them, cash drawers opening, distant footsteps. But here, in this forgotten corner, it was as if time had stalled. You saved 32 of us that night, he said quietly, including me. And the official record says the whole thing was an equipment failure during a training exercise. That's the record. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a phone, and stepped a few feet away. Miranda heard the clipped tones. This is General Harris. I need immediate action on a personnel matter. Yes. Full override. Sierra 9 Delta 40 Tango. I need Spectre Group's medical records declassified, specifically anything tied to Captain Miranda Reeves. Priority. A pause. Then, yes. That level of clearance. Execute. He returned to the table and set the phone down with a finality that spoke louder than the call itself. Bureaucracy may grind slow, he said, his voice low, but I still know how to cut through it when it matters. Miranda looked at him for a long moment. Thank you, she said simply. He nodded. It should have happened a long time ago. The paperwork came in slowly, as expected. A call from the base office confirming that declassification had begun, followed by a cautiously worded message from the VA indicating her case was under active reconsideration. Miranda didn't celebrate. She knew better. Systems didn't turn on gratitude. They turned on pressure. Still, something had shifted, and that shift followed her home. Her quarters on base were sparse functional. A narrow bed, a chipped wooden desk, a bookshelf with more blank spines than titles. The walls held no medals, no photographs. Just one framed map of an area that officially didn't exist. She hadn't put it there to be seen. She'd put it there because forgetting it would have been worse. In the stillness of the evening, Miranda boiled water for tea. The rhythmic pop of the kettle brought her back dust-blown heat, rotor blades overhead, the clatter of metal on metal. She could still hear Callahan's voice echoing over comms. We hold this ground, or we don't leave it. She hadn't wanted to understand what he meant in that moment. By the time she did, he was already gone. She sat on the edge of the bed with the tea cooling in her hands, her eyes fixed on the footlocker beneath the bunk. Its paint was scratched, its hinges stiff, but the lock still turned with the weight of memory. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside, a folded Spectre Group flagon official, never issued, sewn by Rodriguez in a moment of dark humor on a sleepless night in Jordan. Its threads were frayed now. Next to it, a single challenge coin. Heavy, smooth, embossed with a unit crest that had never existed in formal channels. And beneath that, wrapped in oilcloth, the original patch. She ran her thumb over it. Still intact. The stitching hadn't faded like the one on her jacket. This one was preserved hidden away, while the other wore itself nearly invisible in public. Two halves of the same truth, one kept secret, the other barely seen. She closed the locker gently. She didn't want medals. She didn't want speeches. She just wanted the system that had once used her to stop pretending she never existed. The doors to the base training facility closed with a quiet, weighted click behind the two lieutenants. Inside, the air was cooler than the late morning heat outside, but no one was relaxed. They stood stiffly at attention in front of a long table where 3 senior officers sat, Colonel Avery at the center, expression unreadable, arms folded across his chest. Sit, he said, not unkindly, but without warmth. They did. A moment passed in silence. No one touched the stack of folders resting beside the colonel. The clock ticked above the whiteboard. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, cadences echoed faintly from morning drills. You two were at the commissary yesterday, Avery said finally. Correct? Yes, sir. The taller one replied. We were. You witnessed the incident involving General Harris and the woman he saluted. Another pause. Yes, sir. She is Captain Miranda Reeves, retired, former Special Operations. The shorter lieutenant shifted slightly in his chair. Sir, with respect, we had no idea. That's the point, Avery said, cutting him off. You didn't, and instead of withholding judgment, you made her the punchline of a joke in front of junior enlisted, staff, civilians. He leaned forward, voice lower now. Do you know how many service members walk among you without the luxury of wearing their history on their sleeves? How many carry scars from missions we'll never be allowed to teach in open classrooms? Neither lieutenant responded. Spectre Group operated under triple-blind clearance. You mocked the last surviving member of a unit that saved 32 American lives in a hostile extraction with no air cover, including General Harris himself. The silence became a presence. Colonel Avery opened one of the folders, flipping it around so they could see. A page from a revised training syllabus. A case study labeled Reeves Incident Base Respect Protocol. Names were redacted, operational details omitted. But the lesson was clear. From now on, the colonel said, this incident is required reading. You'll present it to your platoons. Not because you embarrassed yourselves, but because it cost someone like her too much to remain invisible. Outside, recruits jogged in formation. Inside, the lieutenants saw the weight of their mistake settle in heavier than the stars they'd hoped to earn. The doors hissed open, just like they always had, letting in the dry Georgia heat behind her. Morning sun poured across the commissary floor in gold-edged streaks, catching the chrome corners of the check stands and the polished boots of soldiers already halfway through their day. But this time, as Miranda Reeves stepped through, something was different. She walked straighter. The limp was still there, subtle, measured but softened now by physical therapy and pain finally addressed. Her shoulder no longer burned with every stretch. The jacket was the same one, still faded around the cuffs, still worn soft along the collar, but the space above her heart no longer held only a ghost. The patch had been restored. Not bright, not flashy. Subdued, stitched carefully with thread the exact hue of desert dust. And just beneath it, pinned with quiet authority, gleamed a presidential unit citation, its blue bar edged with gold, silent proof of something the official records had finally begun to admit. A few shoppers nodded as she passed. Not many. Word hadn't gone public, not really. But it had spread through the ranks, the way real stories always did, low and steady, on the lips of instructors, in quiet classroom corners, passed from sergeant to specialist with a glance and a murmur. The woman in the old jacket was no longer just a curiosity. Near the canned goods aisle, a young man in uniform paused mid-step. He looked up, did a double-take, and squared his shoulders as she approached. Miranda recognized him immediately, Lieutenant Harmon, taller of the two who had once mistaken history for thrift store theater. His face showed it too: recognition, then embarrassment, then something steadier. He stepped aside with a respectful nod. Captain Reeves. Lieutenant. He hesitated, then took a breath. Your case was added to the officer curriculum last month. General Harris made it part of our leadership block: respect, assumption, silent service. Miranda raised an eyebrow, just slightly. I hope they left out the grocery aisle commentary. They did not, he said, and his tone carried no defensiveness, only ownership. That's part of the lesson, too. She nodded. Good. He cleared his throat. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. Miranda held his gaze a moment, then moved on, her boots clicking softly over tile, the weight of memory a little lighter now. The briefing room smelled faintly of dry erase markers, old coffee, and starched uniforms. Rows of young officers sat upright at plastic tables, eyes forward, their notepads open, pens at the ready. The seal of the 103rd Military Intelligence Battalion was projected onto the wall behind them, glowing faintly in the dimmed lights. At the front stood Lieutenant Sarah Mercer, posture exact, her voice crisp as she introduced their guest. Captain Miranda Reeves, Spectre Group. The name hung in the air like static. Miranda stepped forward, the worn lines of her jacket contrasting sharply with the polished digital camo of those seated before her. The patch above her heart drew eyes. So did the presidential unit citation beneath it. But it was her presence, quiet, composed, unshakable, that commanded the room. Mercer took a seat in the front row, her gaze fixed and attentive. Miranda didn't clear her throat. She didn't need to. When she began speaking, her voice was low but firm, the kind of voice that cut through chaos, that knew how to hold ground. "You've read the summaries," she said. "The declassified ones. What they don't teach you is how silence can be louder than explosions, how decisions made in 15 seconds will follow you for 15 years. Or that the map won't save you when the extraction bird doesn't come." The room was still. She didn't speak of names, didn't detail positions or times, but she talked about angles of approach under zero visibility, how to adapt when comms fail, how to move when the weight on your back includes the last hope of 30 people. And she talked about Callahan directly, but in the way she described leadership, the kind you follow not because you're ordered to, but because you know someone's going to stay behind to buy you a few more seconds. When she finished, Mercer stood. "Captain Reeves," she said, "would you be willing to speak with the field team more regularly? What you shared today, we need that kind of truth." Miranda considered the room, these young faces still learning where war hides. "I'll come back," she said. "There's more I can share, and more you need to learn." For the first time in years, the knowledge she carried didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. The ceremony was small by military standards, no flyovers, no parade ground spectacle, just a single flag, the quiet ripple of dress uniforms in the wind, and the sound of a name finally spoken aloud. Miranda stood off to the side beneath the awning, the sun warming the worn shoulders of her jacket. The restored patch caught the light with subdued authority, its threads now intact but still aged, still real. Next to her, General Harris stood at parade rest, his presence silent but grounding. In front of them, Specialist Mateo Rodriguez's daughter, 26 now, in a simple black dress, accepted the Silver Star with trembling hands. The citation read only fragments of the truth. Exceptional bravery, under hostile conditions, critical communications maintained, direct impact on the survival of American personnel. But she knew. Miranda had met with her 2 nights earlier, shared what she could behind closed doors, described her father's calm under fire, his last transmission holding the corridor open long enough for 32 lives to slip through the teeth of death. Rodriguez had died with a radio in one hand and his dog tags clutched in the other. Now, his daughter had the medal he'd earned, but never received, and for the first time, the base stood witness. Afterward, Miranda walked with General Harris across the quiet stretch between the headquarters building and the training wing. Recruits passed them at a jog, but every one of them slowed as they approached. Some saluted, some nodded, none looked away. "They've begun writing the curriculum," Harris said beside her. "We're building a specialized track extraction under hostile uncertainty. I want you on the development team." Miranda's boots clicked against the sidewalk, steady and sure. "You're asking me to teach ghosts, General. I'm asking you to teach survival." She nodded once. "I'll do it, but only if they understand the cost." "They will," he said. As he turned toward headquarters, Miranda continued on alone. Past the parade ground, past the commissary, past the spot where 3 months ago she'd been invisible to all but the ones trained to see. Now, they saw. Not because of medals, not because of a salute, but because the silence had finally broken, and in its place, a legacy had begun to speak.